Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jesse. You're watching JLS Comics. Thanks for pressing play. No, I'm a couple days late on this, but I have been getting questions on it, so here I am. I'm going to give you my thoughts on the latest addition to the CW's Arrowverse. Talking, of course, about Black Lightning. Give you my thoughts, and then at the end, we'll wrap it up nicely with a rating. So stick around. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. It's a really powerful quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. invoked by Jefferson Pierce right in front of his daughter in the show. It's particularly relevant not only for the time, but for the day. Black Lightning actually debuted Season 1, Episode 1 on January 16th, 2018 on the CW channel. And that is literally one day after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, which was the 15th. A little backstory about the show. It actually has been in development for a couple years. Fox ordered a pilot back in 2016. They ended up passing on it, so it ended up being early 2017 when the CW channel picked it up, ordered a full series, and that's what we get now is a 13-episode season. It was written by Salim and Mara Braka-Keel. Salim directed, and of course you have Greg Berlanti producing. He produces all of the CW shows, the Arrowverse. However, this is not part of that just yet, and I'll touch on that in a second. There was one particularly interesting scene towards the beginning, and I'll get into it a little bit later on. But once we had, Salim and Mara Braka-Keel writing this and kind of getting them on, then we got to get the cast together, and we had some really fantastic folks that came on board for the project. Black Lightning, Jefferson Pierce, is played by Cress Williams. He's been around for quite some time. He played in Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Lois and Clark, West Wing, Friday Night Lights, just to name a few. The character of Black Lightning is very interesting. I'll touch on, if you're interested in comics and reading about him, where you can find that. We had Jennifer Pierce, his younger daughter, played by China Ann McClain. She gets into trouble a lot. She goes to clubs, and she has her own powers. And then you have Anissa Pierce, and she ends up becoming a character named Thunder. She's played by Nafessa Williams. Thunder's power is actually, and you see it towards the end, she smashes a sink, is that she can control her density. So she's either incredibly light or incredibly dense. Then we have another character, a really fantastic actor named James Remar, played a classic character named Peter Gamby. He's a tailor and a mentor to Jefferson Pierce. He stayed friends with him even throughout the whole time period when he was quote unquote retired. Another character who's very imposing. We didn't get to see too much of him in the show, but it's Tobias Whale. He's played by Marvin Crondon Jones. Crondon's a pretty cool guy. He actually is out of the West Coast hip-hop scene. If I had to compare him to somebody else, I guess I would say he sounds a little bit like Redman, which actually Redman's from New Jersey, I think, so it's interesting that West Coast guy is picking up on East Coast flavor. But he's the leader of the 100, which is the overarching villain of the show here, and I'll touch on that again as well. One of his sort of lieutenants, he runs the 100 Club for Whale, is a guy named Lala, played by William Catlett. He's a former student of Pierce. So back to Black Lightning, if you want to read a little bit more about him, he actually debuted in April of 1977 in DC Comics. I was Black Lightning #1. He was created by Tony Isabella and drawn in the interior of the book by Trevor Von Eden. The cover, really fantastic cover by the late great artist Rich Buckler. There's been a couple volumes for it, but if you want to start at the beginning, start at 1977's Black Lightning #1. Black Lightning is a few things, and he's really good at it. Cress Williams especially. He's really great at being a principal. He runs the school. He's really great at being a dad, and he's really great as well at being a superhero, which are the three things he's got to do. He's got the swagger and the physicality, the physical stature to pull it off, but at the same time, he's able to show some vulnerability in there. And, when he's finally ready to suit up, because of that vulnerability, because of that connection that you see outside of the superhero suit, it really feels like he's going to save his family more than just be a vigilante. And that's something that they kind of touch on the TV. There's some news clippings about other superheroes, which may be potentially an Easter egg. But we also have a question about, what is a superhero versus a vigilante. So that's an interesting thing that they touch on briefly in the show. So this is supposedly not going to be tying into the rest of the CW, the Arrowverse is what they call it. However, I did speak with somebody at the CW, a contact there. They said maybe next season that it will tie into it, and most likely it would be during one of the major crossover events. Each season, if you're not familiar, on the CW they do a major crossover between all the different shows, so Flash, Supergirl, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow. So that would be where they might introduce him into it. But they are planting those seeds already with the pilot episode here. And that's good, actually. You know, it's cool to have it be part of that, but at the same time, letting this story grow by itself, letting these characters develop without being beholden to other storylines or other things set up in the other shows is really good. They can really develop the characters this way. So I think that is really fantastic. So a little bit about the show. Jefferson Pierce, he basically is a retired superhero. We don't get too much of what his life was before he retired, but he was a superhero. He had his wife and his daughters. His wife actually found him shot up and bleeding in a bathtub, and she left him. She's like, I can't keep worrying about you coming home, not coming home, you know, cut up, what's gonna happen to you. She just couldn't take it anymore, so she left. And after that, he vowed, nope, I'm not donning that suit anymore, I'm done. So in that meantime, he continued to be a dad, of course, but he became a principal at the school, a very influential principal. He actually gave a speech, and he was introduced by a senator that represented that area. Pretty interesting that he really refused. He swore on something and he stuck to it, but at the same time, because of him being the principal for the school, he was able to be a watcher and a protector and an influencer. And one of the powerful things there is with his words. So we skip ahead 9 years. Essentially, we get to the meat and potatoes of the story. We cut into the show, and his daughter was arrested for protesting and civil unrest and police brutality. It's kind of all over the city. The city's name is Freeland, and a lot of it's because of the 100, the gang. So he gets her out of jail, and he's pulled over. And this scene is really powerful. This is one of the major takeaway scenes. This is something that you have to see it to really understand what's going on here. So he's pulled over. It's raining. You know, it's really bad weather out. You have rain coming down. It's really intense. The police lights the red and the blues are flashing off the raindrops and the reflection of the wet windows of the car. And these two cops walk up and they get him out of the car and they slam his head down on the roof. Basically, he's pulled over just because he's black. And he says to him, I really don't think that the description of the black man who robbed the store was a man in a suit and tie with a mid-sized Volvo. And then he also says it's that third time that month. And it's just super powerful. In that moment, he was Jefferson Pierce, but he was also Philando Castile, also Sandra Bland, and just so many others that have gone through something like this. It was really powerful. It was one of the moments in here where it did risk just kind of being really on the nose and really heavy-handed with what it was trying to get across to you. It didn't do that. It was obvious what it wanted you to know from this, but it did it really smoothly. So kudos to Salim and Mara for navigating their way through this scene the way they did. And the cop just keeps saying, have a nice day, sir. And you can see it on his face. You know, he is really angry. This is a time when he could do something with his anger, but he doesn't. He doesn't let Black Lightning out. His fist clench, his jaw clenches. You know, he talks really strongly to his daughters. Put those cameras away. Do what they say, and we'll get through this, hopefully unscathed. They ended up, but you know, he really pushed it down far. He does not want to be a superhero. His younger daughter, you know, she actually gets into trouble with a gang at the 100 Club, which is where Lala is the overseer for. There's one of the foot soldiers who basically gets in trouble with Lala and wants to pimp her out at a hotel that they run, and she just kind of kicked him in the nuts and ran away, and he was in trouble there. So he had to go see his friend. His friend was named Peter Gamby. He runs a tailor shop, basically. He used to help him out. He was the quote-unquote man in the chair for Black Lightning. But even though Black Lightning retired, they still remained friends. He was kind of a father figure, a mentor sort of a guy. He's one of the few people who actually knows that Jefferson Pierce is Black Lightning. So I think that's pretty cool. Basically, because Guy came and had his daughter at the club still, that's why he went to see Peter. He had to go to the club and fight. Really cool fight scenes there. He beat up pretty much everybody. She escaped, so that was good. But then they were talking about Jennifer and Anissa. That's his two daughters. They ended up being abducted right in the middle of the day. Right in the middle of the day from their classrooms by those same gang members. There was one scene that was interesting. They were talking about the school, and they basically said that Jefferson said it, as a matter of fact, I don't want to put metal detectors into schools to make it feel like a prison. A lot of these students have parents who were locked up, and that just would make this feel like a prison as well. But then you have to think, would that have helped prevent his own daughters later in the show from being taken, right? So they kind of throw in a lot of these socially relevant questions, like what is racism and how do you demonstrate peacefully and effectively and get your point across when the other side is being brutal, So those are really good questions that it does address. And again, it's not in a heavy-handed way, so I do like that. So Black Lightning goes, he saves the girls, and there's one really cool scene with Tobias Whale, the head honcho, the guy that runs the 100. Lala's there, and he ends up shooting him with a harpoon. Let me say that again. He shot him with a freaking harpoon. This guy's badass. I can't wait to see more of him and more of his story. This show, they actually show blood from that. Gunshot wounds. It's much of a darker, gritty, and yet realistic feel than some of the other CW shows. A lot of people have said this, but it does kind of mash up Arrow, Luke Cage. Got a little bit of Kingsman thrown in there with Peter Gamby, being the tailor. Flavor of some of the Wire in there as well, so it's a little bit of a mix of all of that in the best possible way. And if you ask me, because they have Tobias in the 100, it's really good because they don't have to follow that typical quote-unquote superhero or villain of the week format. That's really good. They can develop these characters, they can build the story around them and kind of move it forward in a very fluid way without having all these new people jumping in. They have to jump back and forth to the meta story, the overarching story, and then back to the villain of the week story. So that's really good. And another thing that I really liked about this was the soundtrack. You had some really great stuff. Nina Simone, Strange Fruit was in there. You got Isaac Hayes, Jack White. You didn't have like your typical like superhero, those generic instrumentals that they like to do. And then the other thing I liked as well about this was the setting for it. It felt really real. They were out there in the neighborhoods. They were, doing their thing. It didn't feel like they were like in the studio. It didn't feel like it was green screen CGI type of thing. So that really went towards the authentic feel of the film, which was really good. And the other thing that I liked as well was this is a guy who was a superhero and he retired. A lot of the other CW shows, it's, new young kid, learns about his powers, he's got to figure it all out. But this guy did, and he didn't like it. He's already done it. He knows how to kick ass, and he just really doesn't want to anymore. So we don't have to go through that learning curve trope that a lot of the other shows fall into. So that's really good. But we don't, like I said earlier, get to really know exactly what his backstory is. Now he probably is a metahuman, which will be explained, once they get into tying it to the other shows. So that's fine. We don't need to really know that a whole lot yet. And this show, it is really good. The dialogue, the overall plot was just so good. We actually didn't get to see Black Lightning show up till pretty far into the show, but despite that, I was really into it. It was good. It sets a new bar in terms of superhero shows, and it's really a refreshing take on what we've come to know as sort of the normal for it. So good story, solid acting, good sets, like the supporting cast. I like that they're addressing socially relevant issues. Couple things I would probably change. It seemed like they were pretty well off. They had a nice big old house outside of the neighborhood, but they were trying to take care of the inner city, basically, where the school is, where was the principal, where his daughter went to school. So I kind of think that having them be closer to that as their living situation would have upped the stakes just a little bit for them. And then the other final issue I have is really just the two things, is the costume design. Laura Jean Shannon did it. She really knocked it out of the park with a couple things coming up for Titans, actually. Dick Grayson, Brendan Thwaites is Dick Grayson. Really great costume for that, as well as Hawk and Dove. Love how they look. And it's one of those things, kind of like Superman, where you just put on the goggles and it's, hey, I'm wearing glasses. This guy doesn't, so that can't be the same person. So it's like, hey, Black Lightning put on goggles. There's no way in hell that's Jefferson Pierce. So that's pretty much it, but that's kind of nitpicky stuff. I would have liked something a little bit different, and especially with the front, with the really bright blue and yellow lightning bolts, even though it does go back to his original costume, it just maybe doesn't quite work with such a literal transposition to the screen. So that's it. But despite those two things, I still give it 5 out of 5 stars. And you can't judge a show just on one episode, but I am judging this one episode on itself, and let me tell you, I like it. Can't wait to see what happens. Looking forward to it. It's shot up as probably one of my favorite of the CW shows. So you guys got to check it out. Whether you DVR it, you know, watch it whenever, definitely check it out. It's really good. And you get to learn about a character that you maybe didn't know a whole lot about before. So there you go. Go ahead and leave me some comments down below if you like this. I know I ran a little bit long on it, but I did definitely want to talk about it, especially because I was a couple days late, so I figured I could expound a little bit more than other folks have on some of this stuff and, you know, make it a little bit different. But let me know what you thought of it down below. Definitely want to hear your thoughts on it as well. And if it's your first time here, please go ahead and hit that old subscribe button and be part of the JLS Comics family. Would love to have you. All right, guys, this is Jesse. You're watching JLS Comics, and this has been a cinematic review. We'll see you in the next video.